Hey, welcome back to the Farewell North Devlog. It's been about a month since my last entry, and since then I've worked on a ton of new features that I'm excited to show you. But before I do, I just wanted to give a big thank you to all the support that you've shown on the last video. That video received almost 37,000 views, the channel grew by almost 5 times, and the Discord's now up to 150 members, which is absolutely amazing. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you, and let's get into the devlog. So speaking of the Discord, the first feature I want to show you guys came as a suggestion from Gunslinger. I was looking for a way to make an interesting pause menu that would actually stand out and be, not just your typical run-of-the-mill pause. And he suggested to have the camera pan around the characters as you're paused, which I think gives a really nice effect. I also added a little bit of a time element to the pause menu in that when you pause, time actually slows to a crawl as opposed to freezing immediately, and then when you unpause, it kind of springs back to life. And I think this kind of keeps it feeling a little bit more part of the game. Next up, we have a little bit of a reimagining of the way that the will-o'-the-wisps work in the game. So in a previous video, I had gone through the whole process of creating will-o'-the-wisps that would kind of be collectibles throughout the colored world on land. And recently I also showed these kind of sprites that were in the water that you could kind of collect and they would guide you along the way. Based on some feedback and some comments that I got, I decided to kind of reimagine this and kind of combine them into one idea. So now you have ocean wisps that guide your way and restore color as you're traveling. And you also have the land wisps, which have had a little bit of a visual overhaul to behave and look similar to the ocean wisps. So now it's kind of one cohesive idea, but both act as collectibles just in different ways. Next up is a rather small change that actually has a huge impact on level design. Previously there were hidden elements that weren't visible until color was restored. They were completely invisible and you had no idea that they were there. Now there's a translucent effect, so as a player you actually know that there's something to unlock there and you can work towards it. In terms of puzzle design, this actually unlocks a whole new mechanic of gameplay that I'm excited to show you towards the end of the video. While we're here though, I also made some visual enhancements to the way that memories are displayed. So they're a little bit more colorful, there's a chromatic aberration so that there's a little bit of like a hazy effect. And I think it's looking a lot better, but there is still a way to go with it. Speaking of visual improvements, one of the big changes I made is the way that color is blended with the uncolored world. So you can see in this old version how there's white lines on all the surfaces to indicate where color stops. And I think it's pretty striking, but it's also very noisy in more complex scenes like this because you have these lines all over the place and they're all moving independently. So what I've changed is to do a softer blend on all the surfaces except for the terrain. So the terrain still has the hard white line, but everything else has like a softer fade effect, and I think this looks much better. It almost looks like a lighting effect in a way, but it's much less distracting, but you still get the nice visual striking effect on the bigger color restorations where you have the white line on the terrain. Let's keep going with the visual improvements. I don't know how to pronounce this person's name, but they pointed out that the uncolored world looks very uninteresting, and I completely agree. It's something I've thought about almost every day since I've started development on this game. I've put a lot of work into the uncolored world's atmosphere recently, so I'm excited to show you what that looks like. So you've already seen some of the visual improvements so far, but here's the comparison of what it looked like before. As you can see, it was very washed out, it was very flat, there wasn't a lot of texture or lighting, and this made it pretty boring to look at. So what I've done is I've brought back a lot of that data that was lost in the uncolored world, so that I can layer on top the lighting data and the textures to give it a lot more visual flair. So from a technical point of view, I've made this all configurable so that I can really adjust and tune the values. If you crank it all the way up, it becomes pretty uninteresting, but I found it somewhere around 10% is the perfect balance where bringing in just enough of the influence from the colored world, like the lighting and the shadows, to give the world depth and make it feel actually inhabited, without actually going so far as losing the uncolored aesthetic. I also bring less of the lighting and texture data in, depending how far away the object is. So further away objects like this mountain still appear relatively washed out, but they have a little bit of texture to them, and as you get closer, the texture becomes more apparent. The final visual improvement I'm really excited about. I think this adds a lot. So this is for the skybox of the uncolored world, and I wanted to capture something almost like a Rorschach image, or inkblot test. So what I did is I created a shader that basically converts the clouds of the uncolored world into Rorschach images, and kind of slowly fades down and then fades back up, This is mostly only noticeable if you're looking straight up, but you'll catch glimpses of it here and there as you're playing the game. At any point, if you go to the colored world, it then blends seamlessly into clouds, and I think this gives a really cool effect. I think it just adds a lot to the atmosphere of the game. Of course, when you go to the uncolored world, it's able to transition back to the kind of Rorschach image, and it'll essentially just kind of fade down and fade up as you're playing the game, and mostly be out of sight. But I think when you are going up a hill or you're on an area where you're looking upwards, I think it just adds a lot to the mood of the game. Alright guys, just before we get to the new functionality, don't forget to go wishlist the game on Steam. This is a huge help. It basically lets Steam know that there's an audience for the game, and when it does finally come out, it's more likely to get a little bit of visibility on launch day. Alright, so this last one is something I'm very excited about. For a long time now, I've been trying to figure out how to combine the puzzle and the stealth elements of the game with the color restoration, and I think I've finally figured it out in a way that makes a lot of sense and it kind of ties everything together really nicely. So as you can see here, I've integrated a sort of visual color restoration effect around the player. So essentially you can kind of ping or broadcast color out from a radius around you, but it's purely visual. It doesn't actually trigger the normal color restoration effects like bringing things back to life or revealing hidden elements or anything like that. It's just a visual flare. So how does this actually integrate with the gameplay, and how does this tie things together? So let's use this gate as an example. So as you can see, there's a latch on the gate, but because color hasn't been restored, the latch is not visible and she's not able to open the gate. So when you perform this little color ping or broadcast, if there's a lantern in the immediate area, it'll sort of reciprocate. And when it does, it restores color to the area temporarily. So as you're going to see, she's now able to open the gate, but as she's doing this, the color is actually receding away. So these are small, localized, temporary color restorations that do trigger all the normal effects, but they're only temporary. So you can kind of keep activating them, as you can see, and each time you do, it kind of triggers this area of color restoration just in the immediate area, but it's temporary. And so this allows for all different level design opportunities because you can have puzzles that involve these kind of localized color restoration. It also means that you don't need to rely on all the runes and the big color reveals. They can be a little bit more special when you actually unlock one of them. So this also ties into the monster design and the way that stealth works, but you're going to have to wait a little bit longer to see that. I promise it is coming soon, but I'm still working on wrapping it up and figuring everything out. One thing I particularly like about this feature is the sound design, so have a listen. So every time you ping the color out, it's playing this note, and it's a little bit downtrodden, and it's a little bit sad, but when you actually have a lantern in the immediate area and you ping it, it's going to kind of echo back in a really positive way, so check it out. So you see the way how it kind of replies back in a really positive way? I really like that effect. I think it's very satisfying when you're playing the game. And just imagine more of these kind of things, so for example, maybe some fireflies, that kind of thing, where you can kind of like activate them and they kind of reply back to you. I think it's going to add a lot to the game, and I think it's going to be really good for level design. So yeah. There's obviously a lot of polish that needs to be done on this, like it doesn't always blend quite right, and there's a little bit of finessing to do on the effect and the sound and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of gameplay, I'm really happy with how this ties everything together. Alright, so there you have it. As usual, please leave your comments down below. I love getting your feedback and suggestions. They've only made the game better, and so keep them coming. Like and subscribe if you want to see more about the game, and if you're interested in the demo, please join the Discord. The link's down in the description. I'm currently working on finalizing the sort of beta for the demo, which will be available for Discord members. It's going to be like the first 2 islands of the game, and then the public demo will be in the Steam Summer Festival later this year. So if you want to check that out, do join the Discord, link down in the description, and don't forget to wishlist the game on Steam. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one, and bye for now.